Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second leg of Startup Entrep series. My name is Carlo Calimon, serial entrepreneur educator, currently the president and co-founder of Startup Village, a local startup enabler, and still a director of Let's Go Foundation, a non-stock nonprofit organization that advocates entrepreneurship through education. And I will be your moderator for this morning's session on the next frontier of innovative business. Last week, we met some entrepreneurs and technologists to discuss the factors and best practices behind today's most resilient tech companies, exploring how they've managed to not only survive, but thrive through the current pandemic. This week, we'll be diving a little deeper into finding and meeting the opportunities on the horizon for our local innovation community. Joining us for today's chat are some familiar faces to the SPARKUP community, as well as some new faces we're very excited to have on board. In fact, these are my good friends. So this week, we have the first Vice President and Sales Head of PLDT Enterprise, Mitch Locsin. We also have Kickstart Ventures Portfolio Director, Santos. We also have Winston Damarillo. We also have James Lette, Katrina Chan, and Eunice Braga representing Diane Eustaquio of IdeaSpace Foundation. I'll be introducing each of our guests in turn, inviting them to share a quick insight on what they believe is the biggest opportunity right now for innovative entrepreneurs to succeed in these unprecedented times. So first up, right, let me bring in Mr. Mitch Locsin. He's the first Vice President and Sales Head of PLDT Enterprise to kick off today's session. Albert Mitchell Locsin joined PLDT Enterprise in 2011, initially serving as Vice President and Head of Corporate Relationship Management for the outsourcing and offshoring industry until December of 2015, after which he was promoted to head the small and medium business group of the organization called PLDT SME Nation. Mitch Locsin has over 23 years of management experience and over 8 years of business process outsourcing and information technology management practice. Over the years, he's led various companies serving as global business development executive, managing consultant, and executive director. In 2018, he was awarded as the ICT Individual Contributor of the Year by the ICT International Awards. Wow. First Vice President and Sales Head of PLDT Enterprise, Mitch Locsin. Mitch, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Carlo. Very long introduction, not needed anymore. Thank you so much. So, good morning, everyone. On behalf of PLDT Enterprise, it is my pleasure to be joining you all for today's session to discuss what's next for the technology landscape. particularly for our micro, small, and medium enterprises. MSMEs, which account for 99.52% of the total Philippine businesses, were heavily affected by the ECQ. But with most parts of the country slowly transitioning to more relaxed quarantine measures, businesses are now more hopeful as the economy opens back up again. From a brighter perspective, the global pandemic has made us realize how flexible and agile we can be in terms of doing business. Many MSMEs have found ways to reinvent themselves, for example, during the pandemic by adopting new business models or shifting their platforms to online and digital. For example, home-based MSMEs were actually the first shift to stopgap solutions to sell their products amid the lockdown. As an example, MSMEs are further extending their sales reach through social media platforms. MSMEs are shifting to e-commerce platforms, and MSMEs are adopting to contactless payment systems. Now we see that technology has become a critical part of the new normal. And we at PLDT, being the telecommunications and digital service provider for the country, recognize that our services are essential now more than ever to help the business continue their operations. We look at the current challenges of our MSMEs and created CFTs or core functional teams across the group to develop curated solutions. Working closely with the customers from the various sectors, our CFTs were able to identify two major things. First is the realization that the foundation of a digital transformation is a strong, reliable connectivity solution. Second, to enable MSMEs, we have to go beyond connectivity by providing relevant, budget friendly, and simple business solutions that will enable them in the new normal. With our vision to make a positive impact on every single business, we recently launched Beyond Fiber, our newest package of connectivity and digital solutions to inspire businesses to look beyond and transform in this new normal. Beyond Fiber features a set of curated digital solutions ranging from productivity, collaboration tools to e-payments and e-commerce solutions. These services are combined with enterprise-grade Wi-Fi running on our premium fiber service. For offices and stores, for example, Beyond Fiber provides dual Wi-Fi networks, one for work or for office needs and one for guests. To enhance and secure the in-store connections, relevant business tools for scheduling online appointments via Microsoft Office 365 booking app, accepting online payments via PayMaya Business, and protecting work devices via EPLDT's Endpoint Advanced Security Systems available as add-ons. We know that entrepreneurs are keen to invest in digital, but we understand that financial constraints given the current situation may limit the transformation. We heeded to the call of our dear DTI Secretary Mon Lopez to be part of their MSME Reboot program, which is why, in the spirit of Bayanihan, we've introduced a stimulus package, a solution bundled designed to help MSMEs get back on track. We said the package features our newest Beyond Fiber and wireless broadband smart Biz LTE solution, which we will be giving or offering to our clients for free for 3 months of use. To end, I'd like to share a quick way for all of you to get started on this new normal. Upon scanning the code that's shown to you in the screen, you can sign up or inquire for this service I mentioned a while ago. While there's so much uncertainty, what I can guarantee is that we at PLDT Enterprise, with our expertise and capabilities, we will put our best efforts to continuously come up with tailored fit solutions to help your businesses reach your full potential and successfully pivot into this new age of work. We are all in this together. Thank you and good morning again to everyone.
QR code already to check it out. I'll check it out further after the session.
Yes.
So So let's move on. Joining Mitch on today's panel is Mr. Bit Santos, the portfolio director of Kickstart Ventures. Bit is also a good friend. Bit has been a software product development leader for more than 10 years. Prior to his role leading Kickstart Ventures, efforts towards supporting their portfolio companies and nurturing the local startup ecosystem, he was actually the Chief Technology Officer of OLX Philippines, an online classifieds platform company. He was primarily responsible for the product and technology strategy and operations of the Philippine team, while also working on global and regional initiatives within the OLX group. So Kickstart Ventures Portfolio Director, Bit Santos, thank you for joining us this morning. So let me ask a question. In your opinion, what is the biggest opportunity right now for innovative entrepreneurs to succeed in these unprecedented times? Bit?
Hey, Carlo. Good morning, everyone. In advance, I'd like to apologize if there's noise in the background. I am in a live household, so please just ignore any shouting children or cooking happening a few meters away from me. All right. So I think the biggest challenge for innovative startups and entrepreneurs today is just simply making sure that their businesses survive. Right. So startups, true startups, are the opposite of stable by design. There's a reason that venture capital, what we do, is the riskiest asset class. Right? The startups that we invest in are built on an idea of the world and how it should be, and constantly pushing limits to get there. So a global scale event such as this pandemic effectively pulls the rug from under them, and it changes the world in many of the assumptions that the startups are built on. So some of these assumptions are critical. How many people can become customers? How much these people are willing to pay for the product? And maybe most importantly, how much capital can they raise? So change any one of these puts the startup at risk. So I think our fellow VC and actually an investment committee member of Kickstart, Peng Ong, recently said survival is the new growth. Right? Whereas previously the purpose of a startup is really to grow rapidly, but in these times, it's not a time for growth; it's a time for survival. We simply need to survive while the world is changing, and put ourselves into a position to get back on track once we come out the other side.
Thanks, Bit. You mentioned that startups had the rug pulled under their feet, right? So, what are the biggest challenges do you think that is causing this challenge for everybody right now? What is the biggest challenge for startups?
Well, I think from consumers to businesses and even to investors, the moment a big change like this outbreak happens, and the gut reaction is to, wait, I will hold on, I will tighten my wallet and see what happens first, right? So we see customers suddenly stopping their spend, businesses suddenly halting, freezing their budgets, and investors also doing the same. Fortunately, we've been seeing the emergence of new opportunities where, now that we're seeing, life has to go on for consumers, for businesses, and for investors. So consumers are going back to consumption, but obviously in different ways, and we have to recognize those ways. Businesses are starting to go back to business. The show must go on. And as investors, we're also trying to navigate this new normal and also trying to figure out what the new future is.
All right. Thanks, Bit. So let's go up to our next speaker for this morning. Next up, we have Mr. Winston Damarillo, CEO of Talino Venture Labs and the Executive Chairman of Amihan Global Strategies. As the Chief Executive Officer of Talino Ventures Labs, an inclusion tech venture builder that accelerates inclusive growth, Winston has dedicated himself to building technologies and startups catering to the nation's underserved needs communities. Through Talino Venture Labs, he is on a mission to create a more inclusive and sustainable world. Concurrently, he is also the executive chairman of Amihan Global Strategies, a leader in digital transformation in Southeast Asia, as well as the founder of DevCon Philippines, the largest community of tech professionals in the country. Through the current COVID-19 pandemic, he and his team in Talino, Amihan, and DevCon stepped up to rapidly build and deploy crisis response technologies that have served the Philippine government and millions of Filipinos affected by the pandemic. Thank you, Winston, for joining us. Same question I raised to Bit. In your opinion, what is the biggest opportunity right now? And what is also the challenge for innovative entrepreneurs to succeed in these unprecedented times?
Hey, Carlo, how are you? Hello from Los Angeles.
Good to see you again.
You know, I've seen this about 3 times now, and then that ages me a little bit, right? So the dot-com bubble to begin with, and then the crisis in 2008. So categorically, I would say this is the best time to be a startup all over again. So we took a little bit different path in Talino and in Amihan, and we essentially doubled down during the pandemic. DevCon was able to raise about 1,000 developer volunteers that helped the government to create our pandemic response infrastructure for the country digitally. Sa Talino, we essentially pivoted the 3 existing ventures that we built. Saffron, our insurance company, focused primarily on now providing cyber insurance for a lot of people that are moving digital very rapidly. We pivoted our health programs, health insurance products to cover COVID. And we're adding business continuity insurance for a small business that are leveraging Saffron's InsurTech products. Si Ascenso naman moved to provide as much as maybe 50,000 small business loans to our MSMEs. And then Onawa moved from building startups to facilitating digital transactions. And through the pandemic, really cemented and invented the idea of electronic signatures and electronic notaries. And then on top of that, we built 3 new startups.
Wow, you've been busy.
Yeah, and so we built SafePass, the smart city platform that we have initially will address contact tracing. We wanted to help working with TTI and the DOT to ensure that businesses can reopen. We added another platform and another startup called Eat In and Dine In to enable naman restaurants to be able to not only take advantage of contactless and cashless payments, but to survive in the new normal where they don't have to really need to shoulder and cover the cost of food delivery. And then finally, we also built a bank, an MSME bank in Bahrain, which we're now bringing to the Philippines. So we essentially doubled down as a VC. My best startups were built in 2000 after the bubble, in 2009 after the 2008 crisis. So for me as an investor, this is the best time to do it. There's no bureaucracy, there's extreme urgency, and people seems to be open-minded. So we've been excited at Talino. We've doubled our staff in Talino a little bit, and I think the work that we did with the government and for the country at DevCon was very energizing and really parang put your trust back on Filipino development and innovation. And so we've been highly encouraged through this pandemic, and we hope to use this as a springboard for what's next to come.
Wow, congratulations, Winston. As I mentioned, you've been busy over this past few months, and I'm glad to see that you were able to bring all of your ventures together to come up with different solutions that really helped us during these times, right?
So stuck in a condo, that's what happens. Thank you.
I think everybody's maximizing the time they have at home, right? Just to be able to do all of these crazy and exciting stuff as well, right? So thanks, Winston. Also joining us today is Ms. Eunice Braga, the External Relations Manager of IdeaSpace Foundation, a nonprofit accelerator based in the Philippines. Ms. Braga started her career writing for local publications such as the Philippine Daily Inquirer and Chalk, and managing corporate PR campaigns at multinational marketing communications agency, Ogilvy. She is currently the External Relations Manager for IdeaSpace, the Philippines' largest private sector-supported organization for early-stage technology entrepreneurship. She handles marketing communications and donor engagement describing her work as persuading organizations to continue supporting the mission of technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, and social good, and bridging corporations and idea-space startups to mainstream Filipino-made tech solutions and services. Thanks, Ms. Braga, for joining us. So same
Thank you,
question.
Carlo. Good morning. Yes.
Good morning. Yeah.
So I think there's definitely a huge opportunity. I echo Winston's sentiments that this is probably the best time to be a startup. We've seen the startups that have come out of the 2008 crisis, the likes of Uber, Airbnb, and I think especially with how much COVID-19 is expected to change industries, I think that is not only going to one accelerate digital transformation in the Philippines, but two, I think it would also power greater corporate startup engagement. And then three, I think we're also going to see even more activity in terms of the creation, adoption, and mainstreaming of GovTech products and services, which, as you've seen from Winston and Talino Labs' example, is already happening. So I think those are the three key things, not just one, but three key things that we can expect in terms of opportunities for the startup ecosystem.
Thanks, Eunice. How about the challenges? Obviously, when the opportunities arise, there are also challenges that are being faced, not just by the new organizations, but
Yes.
even the existing companies that within your portfolio. Any challenges that you can mention that these companies have been facing over the past few months?
Well, we've actually conducted a survey with PwC and QBO. Natasha Kat can speak more about that later. But I think one of the most pressing challenges is definitely having enough of a runway to last the next 6 months over the next year. We've also done our own informal survey with the startups in our portfolio, and some of the other pressing challenges that they're facing is really talent acquisition, customer acquisition, especially since the quarantine prodded some businesses to be a bit more tight with budgets. And then definitely also employee management with the remote work and work from home setup. And then also, I think seeing as well what kind of government support or regulation would arise for startups in the wake of the pandemic.
All right. Thanks, Eunice. Well, we'll get
Thank
back to
you.
you again in a while. Up next, we have Mr. James Lette, the Executive Director of Manila Angel Investor Network, the largest committed private investor network in the Philippines. With a particular interest in impact investing, James is responsible for sourcing high-potential, early-stage Philippine startups, performing due diligence, mentoring entrepreneurs, and even opening networks for them. The Manila Angel Investor Network, or MAIN, was formed in 2016 to support the country's startup ecosystem by connecting investors with promising early-stage startup companies. Thanks, James, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Carlo.
Sure, happy to have you. In your opinion, what's the biggest opportunity and what are the biggest challenges these innovative entrepreneurs are encountering right now?
Yeah, I'll be very brief, but the opportunities are manifold. It depends on effectively what your industry is. We know that some industries are thriving. We know that many are challenging. I mean, as a number of the speakers so far have said, this could be a time when the unicorns of tomorrow are being founded. I'm looking forward to finding out if that happens. But there's massive opportunities if you understand your market. I mean, if you think more strategically, there's going to be some significant reordering of the global supply chain that Philippines can take advantage of. We'll get into that, I think, with a bit later in the discussion. But the key challenge, and that as MAIN, that's our key concern, is that there needs to be a startup ecosystem that survives this crisis so that it can grow and scale and take advantage of these opportunities that will come up. And that, to me, is the key challenge, and that's cash flow. Cash is king. There's been a collapse in consumer demand. There's an inability to provide some services during ECQ. Corporate payment periods have ballooned out to 120 days plus. So, it's significantly affecting startup revenues. Their runways are really constrained. And so there's a huge crisis amongst a number of the startup community where, it's one of survival. So what we've been talking about to some of our stakeholders is, we're promoting the need for innovative blended finance solutions to inject some more capital into this ecosystem so that at the end of this crisis, when other ecosystems like Singapore, who have been backing their startups with significant cash flow support, when everything goes back to the new normal, the Philippines is well placed to compete with others in the ASEAN who will be entering our market and taking advantage of those opportunities.
Thanks, James. I think it's nice that you mentioned that, we want to have a startup ecosystem to support all of these startups after this. And I think, you have everybody, in this panel working towards that. So perfect. So we'll get back to some of the concerns or points that you mentioned earlier in the discussion in a bit. So rounding out today's panel is Ms. Katrina Chan, Director of QBO, a Philippine innovation hub and startup platform, which she co-founded in 2016. QBO is the first of its kind public-private partnership initiative in the country specifically geared to provide resources, connections, and support to accelerate the growth of Philippine tech startup companies. It was formed through a collaboration among the Department of Science and Technology, Department of Trade and Industry, IdeaSpace, and JP Morgan. At QBO, Ms. Chan advises startups and leads overall program and business development activities, collaborating closely with startup ecosystem partners. Kat, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Carlo. And long intro again, maybe you should. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today in this socially distant world that we live in. And it's a bit tough being the last one because I think all of the panelists have already shared some kind of great insights into that first question around the challenges and opportunities that we're facing. So I think I'll maybe just quickly recap some of the points that were mentioned already, right? Like, obviously, we are facing, in a way, a big reset, right? Everything's different. From a startup's perspective, everything from capital raising to how we access customers, mobility, and, the very survival of our startups is really at peril, even before all of these things happened, right? Like, startups have always been inherently risky, but again, we're seeing these changes in every aspect of our lives, including how we're communicating and interacting and growing now. So it's definitely something that we need to face, but it also presents, and I like the title of this panel, right? Innovating towards a better normal. So, again, all of this creates an opportunity for our startups to build and to innovate and to create solutions that will be how we can approach not just reopening, but actually thriving and potentially growing. And these circumstances also have shifted or reset the way that potential business partners, investors, the government, right, approach how to build solutions. I think, as was mentioned earlier by Winston, I believe, businesses are potentially more open-minded to working now. Maybe, we're more willing to set aside some of our old practices, right, to embrace new norms. And these are some things that startups can, take advantage of, knowing that, again, I haven't seen 3 of these before, but at least in the last one, right, like, as Eunice mentioned, the previous kind of big crisis was the renaissance or the beginning of things like some of the mega startups that we see today. So, we'll look back on this as we build the new next normal or the better normal, right? And what I hope to see is, new startups, new solutions that emerge from this crisis and really define how we live and work in the future. And I hope to be optimistic about that. I know that there are ways that our actions that we take today, right, and how we work together today can potentially define how our startups will survive and manage and hopefully have the opportunity to grow after this crisis. So, I'm glad that we're coming together, right? And there's willingness on the part of different sectors. I see even in this panel representatives from different segments that can really contribute to building and strengthening and making sure that our startup community survives this and that we can move forward. So those are some things that I'm looking forward to discussing with all of my co-panelists today. And yeah, thank you so much again for having me be part of this discussion.
All right, thanks, Kat. And as everybody can see, all of our viewers can see, we have a nice, group of people who are going to be sharing their insights in a bit during the panel discussion. Now, before we move into our actual discussion, we have a quick video we'd like to share highlighting one of the technologies helping people in business bridge the current crisis and empowering them for a better normal.
Welcome to a world made more convenient with GCash. Shop and dine easily with GCash QR, send money to family and friends, make withdrawals with GCash MasterCard, pay your monthly bills, and transfer to over 30 banks, all with one app. It doesn't stop there. We've got something for your business too. GCash for Business, a fast and flexible platform where clients can disburse funds easily with no setup fees. Our simplified workflow enables clients to open a corporate wallet, then securely disburse funds to employees. When you sign up to GCash for Business, you enjoy a bunch of other benefits that go beyond what others have to offer. There's no maintaining balance to worry about. In other words, zero maintaining balance for you and your employees. It's accessible 24/7 through a web-based platform. You can manage everything, plus you can customize it to your needs. Account activation for your employees is quick and easy. All you need is one valid ID and a few minutes to fill up a form on the GCash app. Reports are made available whenever you need them, and your employees will receive an SMS notification once they receive their funds and whenever they transact using GCash. And on top of that, they can access all GCash features right at their fingertips. Setting this up for your business is simple. Your HR officer consolidates all employee information, IDs, and signatures into the system. Your finance officer then uses this information to disburse properly to each employee, so that all your employees have to do is wait for the SMS notification and they can use their pay as they please. Easy, right? Experience the convenience of going cashless with GCash for Business.
Okay, we're back. So to facilitate this this morning's discussion, I'll be directing questions towards specific panelists. But should anybody of our group or panelists, if anybody would like to share their insights, please feel free to jump in. By all means, feel free to share what you want to share in relation to that question. So let's keep the conversation as flowing as possible. All right. So as we have seen, our panelists have already shared some initial insights. So let's kick off today's conversation by exploring the role we see in innovative entrepreneurship playing in the world today. So my first question will be directed towards Winston. Winston, I didn't realize that you were coming all the way from LA. But that's how borderless we are right now, right? So, I want to direct this first question to you, to one such entrepreneur who helped organize the innovation community to roll out not one, but 4 initiatives towards aiding in our national response to COVID-19. Can you give us a bit of a backdrop on how projects like Stay Safe came about, and what are some of the lessons you learned from that experience? I just want to emphasize, you mentioned earlier, this is your 3rd one. So you've gathered a lot of experiences over, 3 different crisis, so you're an expert in this already.
Yeah, well, I think that what had happened was during the pandemic, everybody was stuck at home and worried, and there's a degree of helplessness when you're stuck at home. So I think we went back to what's comfortable, and being geeky is comfortable for me. So I started talking to my fellow geeks at DevCon and started brainstorming what we can do. And I guess timing lang, IATF was looking for a solution to help with our quarantine management. There's about 12 million Filipinos in Manila NCR that needs to stay home. and about 1 million critical frontliners that need to traverse safely around our checkpoints. And so they were asking us if there's something we can do to build to do that. So that became a really good catalyst because it enabled us to parang focus the effort of 1,000 developers and get to a goal. And we built a product that is nationally deployable, that can handle about 1 million QR code passes and 180 checkpoints concurrently with real-time access in 3 weeks. So kind of gets you to really think what you can do if there's no artificial barriers to that. So from then on, it got addicting. We built Relief agad after that. This time naman serving about 20 million people that needed relief and ayuda, tranche 1, tranche 2. And then naman we discovered that, hey, we can build really, really large platforms. I think at the height of it, we were processing 15,000 transactions per second for Relief agad. And so it was just kind of snowballed and steamrolled from there. We then built our donation platform flag for the Office of Civil Defense. And then from then on, you start thinking between pandemic response, which is a stopgap, to new normal or next normal, right? And then that's kind of brought about SafePass because we needed to open the stores, and Eat In because restaurants are really hurting and we want to make sure their viability is preserved and expanded. And all the way to creating hyper-local digital groceries called Digi Palengke in Bataan. So I think there was a continuity actually between innovation in response to pandemic and innovation in response to emerging opportunities in the market. So I think, for as long as we Pinoys continue to believe in ourselves, there's a lot of things to do. And the problem to solve is right in our backyard. So it was really encouraging, and we were blessed that our business were doing good as well, and funding was relatively available for us. So we took this time in the last 90 days to build 3 new startups, and then we pivoted the first 3 startups that we built in the beginning of the year.
All right, thanks, Winston. I think there are a couple of things that I take away from what you just mentioned, in that especially the beginning of the pandemic when everybody was worried. There were really a group of people, or in your case, group of developers who really took action, right? They didn't sulk. They didn't, just remain worried. You guys said, okay, since we're here anyway, might as well make it productive and do something about it, right? So you had a different mindset in that sense. And I like the fact that you mentioned also about continuity. And that continuity mindset is supposed to also propel us forward, right? That, we're not satisfied with what's available out there. And it's about us being able to, quote unquote, continue on a better path in that sense, right? And coming up with new things. As you mentioned, you pivoted some projects to suit the existing times.
Yeah, it was good. And I think it's good for the soul, I think. And it's more important than, so we played offense instead of playing defense. And I think every startup should have that mindset.
Great, thanks, Winston. I'll now move on to questions for Kat and Eunice. So, Kat and Eunice, you can answer. Anyone of you can choose to answer at any given time. But the question is basically, as a community organizer, Winston was able to mobilize 1,000 volunteers to help create pretty impactful change at a time when it was very much needed. This next question is for you two as community leaders. As mentors to so many local startups, are there any trends you see across industries of startups pivoting to respond to COVID-19? Or perhaps are there any opportunities they found to thrive amidst the current situation? Kat, maybe you can start?
Sure. So maybe to start with, also for our viewers, so Eunice and I, we work with startups in particular. It's I guess drawing the differentiation between tech startups and sort of the traditional businesses and MSMEs, right? Where which typically deal with more traditional business models that are not necessarily tech-enabled or particularly scalable. So to begin with, startups, right, or the tech startups that we typically work with, they're usually exploring, new areas or ways to solve problems and using technology, right, to be able to rapidly scale or come up with a different way of doing things than, what may have been in the past. So I'm not sure if that's a great definition, but essentially, like, in that sense, startups, in a way, like, this is their moment, right? Like, you sort of calling on startups now to say, like, hey, you're supposed to be good at, coming up with novel solutions for things that we have never faced before. And now here is a situation where, all of us, again, have been forced to, things like working from home has become normal, right? Or whereas in the past, perhaps it was a very select group of people that were primarily transacting online, or, I don't know, streaming and getting most of their content digitally. Right now, it's become, in a way, part of the normal for many people. So that being said, right, I think a lot of us are experiencing, or intuitively would be familiar with, where the trends are in terms of startups that are continuing to succeed or address issues that are particularly relevant, especially now that we're in quarantine and we're facing things like social distancing, right? So to give a few examples, of course, anything involving e-commerce and also remote delivery of services, I think, is particularly relevant. We see startups that are doing kind of on-demand services, right? Whether it's healthcare, whether it's getting your groceries or certain tasks done, and enabling us to live our lives, right? Or to transact even without kind of physically gathering or going to, do certain tasks. And I think, especially definitely, like, in terms of the back end of that, yeah, right, platforms including Gcash, and also things like internet connectivity provided by PLDT, right? We're also kind of in our panel today. This is the backbone for allowing a lot of these services and transactions to happen. And when you look at B2B or business to business, on that side of things, right, we also see things like a shift to, that's how we interact with bigger organizations. So the delivery of remote education or virtual or blended learning, and even, platforms to manage the back end of that, right? Like online enrollment, online enlistment, like, how do we do these things again, now that everyone's kind of doing it in decentralized fashion? Same goes with healthcare, right? So there's a huge hesitation to, let's say, gather in hospitals or, expose yourself, right? And so can we deliver, telehealth remotely? Can we, so things like that. So I think that's one aspect, like dealing with the immediate kind of impacts of, COVID-19 and the pandemic. But then there's also a whole other set of startups, right, are dealing with how do we now address, like, as we reopen, how do we get there, right? How do we, again, rebuild our businesses, grow, inspire confidence again, and what practices need to be in place, as we transform our businesses to adapt, right? So I think those two areas are where there are definitely huge opportunities, and where we see a lot of our tech startups, building and kind of testing and validating different solutions as well.
Thanks,
So,
Kat.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ines?
Sure. Actually, I have to go back to a talk that we co-organized back in November for Philippine Startup Week. Because I had to go back to my notes. It was funny. Hugo was talking about how large the internet economy was going to be in Southeast Asia, and in particular the Philippines. And one of the charts that they showed was like which products or services were already widely adopted and which were about to reach the inflection point. So back in November 2019, the services or products that had yet to reach the inflection point were on payments, remittances, insurance, investments, education, and healthcare. And it's pretty amazing to see how, because of this pandemic, it's basically forced those areas into that inflection point, along with further accelerating the adoption of e-commerce and all of these platforms and marketplaces beyond the traditional urban centers. I think there's definitely, I think for me, if I'm to summarize it, we're seeing two things. Definitely a lot of acceleration in digital transformation, but also I think there's an opportunity in creating or developing solutions to address new essentials, cleaning services, on-demand cleaning services, where you can book, cleaners to disinfect, sanitize homes, workplaces, common areas. We're definitely also seeing, if we're only basing it on social media chatter, there's a lot of talk about small scale farming and urban gardening, and you can expect some activity in that area as well. Digital insurance, definitely. Community trade. I think Kat was talking about education earlier. Are we about to see Sesame Street for mobile, like multiple screens? And that's definitely a possibility given the sheer number of children that are having to go to school under this blended learning setup. And then we're also seeing digital experiences because there's a lot of demand for connection, especially since we're all practicing physical distancing. And then also a lot of definitely building that stronger ecosystem. We're talking about telehealth, telemedicine earlier. Definitely would want to see a more mature system in the future where it's easy to transact, to get a consultation, get medicine and other supplies, and pay all those fees, and even in the future be able to get mental health support and other similar services online. So I think there's definitely a host of opportunities in terms of the accelerating digital transformation front and really developing products and services to address what we are seeing are the new essentials.
Thanks, Eunice. I think that taking up from what Kat and Eunice mentioned, I think that at the end of the day, it's about developing practical and relevant innovation at this point, right? Take advantage of this moment to
at this moment, like anything, right? Like there's opportunity to innovate and create something in practically any space. I think between Eunice and I, we've basically listed every industry, right? Like maybe except for travel, I'm not sure, but I think that's definitely a takeaway. Like take advantage of this time, or build on what we're seeing, right? And it could be in practically any space. Like there's definitely opportunities to create something.
Thanks,
Yes,
Kat. I think that also there are certain industries that are being prioritized in that sense. You both mentioned agriculture, which is relevant need for food. Right now, also education and health technology, and even finance are being at the top of the list of technologies or innovation being prioritized at this point. All right, so I'll now move on to questions for Bit and James. As mentors and supporters of the startup community yourselves, are you observing similar trends? Many startups are really cash trapped and struggling to make it through the current crisis. Any insights from your side that you can share with our listeners today? James, sorry, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, I'll kick us off. I mean, I'll pick up on those last points. As Kat said, everyone's innovating. Government, schools, even sari stores are innovating. So there's going to be some incredible learnings, and when people find out what works and what doesn't, there'll be some significant advances. But I'm a bit contrary in some ways, in that, for instance, we're a big backer of EduTech, in that we've about a quarter of our portfolio is EdTech. But how you implement an idea is as important as the idea. And unfortunately, the implementation of online learning for some students has antagonized a lot of parents globally. So I think there'll be a bit of a pushback against online learning once we get back to the new normal, where that will be. I mean, the other thing is, it's still too early to say. I mean, there's no experts in this. This is a new experience for everyone in the world, and we have to add a caveat in that, I know from a previous life in community development that behaviour change is incredibly difficult to achieve. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of time. So, if we do get clear of COVID and go back to the past, the question will be, will people return to their old behaviours? So what will be the ongoing effect of this on business models and markets? And that, I don't think anyone knows. There'll be some clear winners like e-commerce where, unfortunately, if you think people can be, they look for the frictionless path of least resistance. E-commerce is giving that to them. Online learning isn't giving that to parents. They're finding it quite frictionful, whatever the opposite word is. But on that, going back to your original question, there's a huge need out there. We've been working primarily with our portfolio, both helping them to pivot, to rearrange their models, to work on their cost base, to manufacture, to extend their runways, injecting more capital where that's been needed. So that's taken up a lot of our time, and there's that would be replicated across the ecosystem, and I'm sure Bit has some experience with that with his portfolio.
Thanks, James. Bit, you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, James. Well, I guess like what we've been seeing in the portfolio, like there are certain verticals and business models that they become apparent that they are in a good position. So any business that rely on high-touch interaction have obviously been hit the hardest. But those businesses who are in the digital delivery of good services and content are very well positioned and should find ways to take advantage of the opportunities that have emerged in the current environment.
Right.
Businesses in B2B SaaS are also, I think, have huge opportunity. So more companies than ever are willing and open to rethink their ways of working and bringing in new products and services that can, help them stay productive, but also keep their people safe. And I think maybe the most important thing for businesses to not just survive, but even potentially thrive in these times is having proactive leadership, right? Across all verticals and business models, that is one thing that we've seen common in startups who are doing very well, even given the challenges. They have been proactive in identifying how do these changes in our environment affect my business, and how must we adapt? What costs do we have to cut? What initiatives do we have to cut? What do we have to focus on that'll ensure survival and ensure, in some ways, ensure optionality down the future to generate value further down the road. It's also relying on experience. If you have leaders within your organization who have experience in economic downturn, right? For a lot of relatively young founders and entrepreneurs, this will be the first global economic downturn that they will have experienced. Right? If you have anyone in your organization, or especially your advisors, your investors, your mentors, who may have experience that can complement yours, by all means, lean on that. And I think lastly, also kind of relating to the leadership, we see a lot of founders feeling a lot of stress around the situation because they feel, and rightly so, accountable for their business, but also for their people. Right? They are responsible for the livelihood of their people and their customers. And that is a heavy, heavy burden to bear. And if you need to take the time to take care of yourself first, take the time that you need to step back, take care of yourself, so that you can make sure that you can take care of your people, your business, and your customers.
Thanks, Bit. I think that both of you kind of touched on this, but one of the things that we need at this point, or what we see at this point, is really a change in behavior, and we're hoping that startups take advantage of these changes in behavior so that they can gain traction and usage and even recognition from the market. I believe we do have a additional comment also from Winston. Winston, maybe you would like to jump in.
I just wanted to encourage James and Bit to invest more. Actually, during the time I was doing this, I actually did pick up quite a bit of investments right after pandemics. And the one thing that keeps always recurring is that, you know, there are people that are going to pivot, and they're going to shrink, and they'll have baggage with them. And there are people that are going to restart. You know, they take this opportunity to start fresh and move better from that perspective. And just as kind of historically, you know, it's been a good experience for me, for people that have actually restarted, kind of played the new rules of the games, you know, post-pandemic, and not carry the baggage of the past. So I know it's a tough message to a lot of startup, but I think it's a good opportunity to do that. And like I said, a lot of VCs and incubators make a lot of money this time around.
Thanks, Winston. And I think that's good insight, because normally you'd based on what we've heard, investors are going to be a little bit more focused right now, right, in terms of how they invest their resources. So that's good to know. Let me now move
on that point. I was recently talking to our investment team and kind of talking, how has our deal pipeline changed, if it did, during this time. And when we were having a look, like, it didn't slow down. We have not seen a slowdown in founders and entrepreneurs trying new things, trying to raise the resources they need to solve the problems that they're seeing. So that is very promising. And I think we also have to acknowledge, again, like what I think Winston and James had briefly mentioned, coming out of, again, global scale events like this, it is a very good time to invest, right? Coming out of the dot-com crash, we had Google, we had Salesforce come out. Coming out of the global financial crisis, we had the likes of Slack, Uber, Airbnb. So it's really on us investors to find these entrepreneurs who have found, like, what is not just the new normal, but what is the new future, right? And help them to build that.
Right. Thanks, everyone. This next question goes to Mitch. Mitch, as an expert that works closely with businesses of all sizes across various industries, do you have any critical insights you can share with startup entrepreneurs? Any opportunities for investment, collaboration, or impactful innovation that they should watch out for?
Oh, thank you, Carlo. Actually, there's really a spur in the startup industry, as I listen to my colleagues in the panel in the startup industry. But the COVID-19 pandemic has truly sparked innovation, and compelling startups and institutions find new solutions for the new normal. And one innovation I like, for example, is the IoT-enabled CCTV project called the Project Green Grass. PLDT actually partnered with Things PH, which is an IoT platform and solutions provider for this project. And Project Green Grass, one aspect, our end-to-end smart city solution is a free online community map, for example, of real-time street activity using CCTV networks. It allows the community or the LGU to have a view of the crowd density, whether it's per barangay or in a certain area. So this really helps the LGUs manage their operations efficiently of their respective locations. Another example is the healthcare industry. I don't know if everybody knows, but the Department of Health came out with a circular that everything would start with telemedicine. And since that happened, there was a surge in requirements for telemedicine apps. And we started working with multiple startup companies in the Philippines, local startups, and started assessing their telemedicine apps, which included basically the appointment setting, video conferencing with the doctor. It even included e-prescription e-payment as far as medicine delivery. So there's a lot of opportunities for the industry. And again, this is just an example of how we are partnering with a lot of these startups. So we together pose a smarter future on using advanced technologies. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Mitch. I'll be now turning the floor over to questions coming from our comment box. And the first question goes: what solutions are out there that you see startups can offer in our current crisis? Are there any favorite ones that you've seen? Solutions that startups can actually come up with? Mitch, maybe you have some insight on that.
Well, I shared that a while ago, the Project Greengrass, the CCTV solution. There are a lot of new technology out there which we're working on, like, for example, CCTV solutions with thermal scanners that applies very well on the hospitality industry, which we're trying to assist on revamping or opening up of the hotels. On the e-learning side of things, it's basic connectivity, but as James mentioned, it's going to be a little of a struggle, especially for the public schools. But we're looking at our own TV5 and IPTV4 of the government to actually assist on how we can deliver online learning or through broadcast for the students. But there's so much we can do. Everything right now is focusing on the new normal, and we're open to partner with a lot of new innovative solutions that the startup industry is bringing about.
Thanks, Mitch. Eunice, you want to jump in on that question?
Sure. We do have a couple of startups that were, I guess, ahead in terms of the digital transformation part. So, like top of my head, definitely the likes of Taxumo, which allows people to file taxes, SSS, and other contributions online. And then another interesting startup in terms of the blended learning edtech space is Front Learners. They've been around a while, and they've managed to create a solution that works both online and offline, which I think will be critical as both public and private schools move into that blended learning platform. And they've been battle tested as well. They've piloted their solution in communities post typhoon and even post Marawi. So I think they're one of the startups that's definitely prepared for this moment. And then I think also from one of our recent batches, the likes of Pan Delivery, which is a hyper local service. Before the pandemic, they were delivering food, medicine, even pet supplies. And one of the questions that they often got before COVID happened was, what's going to happen to you once Grab and Food Panda arrive in your city? But what they've been able to show is that because of their size, they've been very nimble and agile. And I remember seeing in the first 2 weeks of the quarantine that they jumped right on the opportunity to work with tricycle drivers who may have been displaced because of the pandemic, and bring them on board as additional delivery support for the business that they work with and for Pan Delivery. So I think those are some initial ones. Definitely also thinking of the likes of Cleaning Lady now that homes and workplaces are transitioning back to this new normal, and health sanitation is definitely going to be a priority for people. So definitely seeing a lot of activity in those areas. Our edtech startups are probably some of the busiest ones. We've also had entrepreneurs who pivoted a bit. If you're familiar with Style Genie, Abby basically transitioned during the quarantine and started Grocer Genie, which is one of the many startups delivering essentials during this time. So there's definitely a host of solutions, and if the activity from DevCon and Startup Weekend and a lot of activities are to go by, we're going to see a lot more startups born out of this time, I think.
Thanks, Eunice. Anyone else want to share in relation to that question? James?
Yeah, I mean, we've still been quite active during the quarantine period, and the startup community is very active. We've screened and mentored close to 100 startups since ETQ kicked in. What we're seeing is that the startups tend to have the same mission, the overall objective, and what they're modifying is their business model, and they're trying to find a new product market fit that suits the new normal. So I haven't seen anything new in terms of how the pandemic's going to affect society. I don't think the thinking's quite there yet, and the iterations aren't there yet, but I think that will start coming through. We're backers, as Eunice said, we're backers of Taxumo and Kumu. So, they're ones that have pivoted their model, and they're doing exceedingly well at the moment growing through this crisis. There are others that we're pitching this week. We're looking at 3 new startups. We're looking at one that works with the supply chain to make the supply chain more sustainable. We're looking at one that is more of a social media online play, and also looking at a HR tech one, so that HR will adapt. I mean, new workplaces, that's one of the long-term trends that I suspect will come through, is that people are realizing that you don't need to be in the office as much. You don't need to travel across town. You don't need to spend an hour in the car going from Makati to Quezon City. So there are changes, but I don't think the missions of a lot of startups will change. It's just the implementation and how that's achieved will vary.
So thanks, James. Since you were just up there, I'm just curious, what kind of startups are angel investors willing to support at this point?
Yeah, as I mentioned, those 3 that we're looking at the moment. I mean, there was, right at the start, we took a step back, because what angel investors need, I mean, it's a very uncertain investing environment. You're basically picking a team, backing them and the idea. But when the only certain part of that equation, which is the marketplace, that's completely up in the air. It's too uncertain. We think that there's more certainty now, so we're re-engaging into that. We're putting forward this week 3 that I mentioned. We'll then go from there, and I will let you know next week how the syndicates form on those. But there is certainly the appetite. The capital markets, they're now getting back to overvalued, and the risk factors there. So the money's coming back into these alternative investments like angel investing. So I think it's, it is promising, but you do need to, in your pitch deck, you need to have a strong argument as to how you will adapt through COVID, how your product market fit now fits what may be the new normal, and give the investor a strong belief that the team has a plan to optimize and take advantage of the situation as it is at the moment.
All right. Thanks, James. Actually, I agree with you. Even us in Startup Village, we're also having continuous inflow of people who want to pitch and investors who want to invest as well. Right. So maybe I'll go with this question also from the comment box. And this goes to anybody in the panel. Is there any surge in startups in the Philippines during this pandemic? Any news or information you can share on what's surprising in the local startup community during this pandemic? Anyone? Maybe Kat or Bit can chime in on that question.
Yeah, Carlo. Hi. So I think Kenny touched on this briefly in her intro. Around April, in the beginning of the pandemic, we actually, IdeaSpace together with PwC and QBO and the DTI conducted a survey on basically how the health of our startup ecosystem, right? And so it's part of a series of surveys that we typically do, but we launched sort of a special one just because everything had kind of changed overnight with COVID. And I guess to give the viewers some idea of what's going on, right? Around a fifth of our startups, like 20 odd percent, right? Of the startups in the Philippines we're looking at are definitely experiencing an outsized surge in demand, or people who want to write their startups, and they're facing a whole different set of challenges, right, in terms of how they're going to go about meeting that demand and scaling up their businesses virtually overnight, right, versus everyone else, right? So the 60-80% where they feel that their businesses were definitely adversely affected, the demand dropped overnight, right? So, and for that group, right, the challenge is now how do we pivot or retool ourselves, and how do we think of solutions that can still stick, right? No, so not just to adapt to what's going on for today, but have a business that can be sustained in the future. So that was one of the things that we found in that survey. We also were really trying to look at, what is needed for this, this subgroup, right? This group of startups to survive. So are there a lot of people that are looking to start startups right now? I think what we've seen more of there are people that, I guess, in order to kind of survive this immediate time, like maybe they lost their jobs, right? Or they're looking just for some immediate kind of income opportunity. They are more willing to try out, like sort of micro businesses. But it's, I think, a different story when you're talking about companies that are really looking to be those kind of larger, kind of more scalable startups, right? So there's definitely an increase in business activity, but that's not necessarily tied with, what we can predict to be for sure sustainable growth, right, in the startup ecosystem. So that's still something definitely that we are working on, that we are very concerned about at QBO, that we are working with the government on. And I think, Maine and a lot of the sort of enablers in our ecosystem are definitely watching this very closely, and we're looking at how do we again ensure the survival, if not the growth, of startup activity in the Philippines.
Thanks, Kat. Bit, you wanted to ask? Bit?
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, I was actually I'm mostly going to echo actually what Kat said, where, and I think I mentioned this brief earlier, where we have continued to see a good number of pitches from entrepreneurs, founders, aspiring founders, looking to solve challenges already presented by the pandemic. But yes, exactly as Kat said, one of the challenges for us is finding those that are looking to solve these problems in a sustainable and a scalable manner. I think it's a very good sign that we're seeing all of these entrepreneurs identify these opportunities, but it's also just as important to have everyone be aware that the demand for these kinds of solutions is also there, right? Again, because being from a corporate VC, I have a bias towards B2B, so the demand from corporates, and as Mitch briefly touched on earlier, more and more of these folks are open to bring these startups in, bring innovation into their doors, right? And exactly, government. I guess further commentary aside, like this pandemic has really stretched the capabilities of our government and almost all governments, right? And I'm seeing a very promising willingness and openness from the government as well, to collaborate with startups to extend their capabilities through the innovation that our founders are working on. So I think it's also important for us to recognize that.
Thanks, Bit. And, I'd like to thank all of our panelists for this morning. Definitely a lot of great insights and knowledge for everybody that's viewing us on this channel. Before we wrap up, maybe can I get a closing statement from all of our panelists? Maybe touching upon also what you think will be the next frontier for the local innovation community. Anyone want to start?
Well, I'll start.
Go ahead, Vincent.
Yeah, so I just want to underscore the importance of and the role of government in this reboot of startups. No, I think that we have seen in the pandemic that there's a lot more infrastructure that the government needs. We still don't have a national ID. We're still working on platforms for amelioration. We have just concluded for the first time digital payments hackathon for BIR. So I think there's a lot of what I would call digital build. That's a great opportunity to work with government, and the government, has been really open to doing that now with startups. So kind of on a contrarian thing, I think capital and lending is less important for startups than actual business that the government can give to them. And I think it's really important to seek out those opportunities. Revenue is much better than equity and capital. So I think that's another avenue that our startups should take a look at.
Thanks, Winston. I do agree that maybe the government should really help in jumpstarting also the businesses of our startups, right? By being clients for them. All right. Up next, Kat.
Thanks, Carlo. So I think the challenge really for the government, for all of us, right? And what I really would like to encourage is that we hashtag support startups, that we patronize their products, that we, if now is the time that we're open to adopting new solutions, that we actually try out and, give business to our small businesses, but our tech startups in particular. They are building cool things across different, and some of the examples were given by my co-panelists here today, but it's really an opportunity and that's really the best way to help our startups right now is to help them get traction. It also helps them raise money, right? So, and I guess I did want to kind of quickly plug a couple of things. That the government, we're working with them, and as Winston mentioned, it's definitely this digital build mindset. So definitely kind of capitalize on that and, be proactive in kind of seeking out some of the resources that might be available now that, wasn't accessible to you before. We actually have a website where you can literally support startups on supportstartups.com. We list, a bunch of startups have listed promos there and things both offers for businesses and for customers that, again, they could definitely use a hand in getting more traction for some of the things that they're building. And then I definitely wanted to close out by bringing to your attention, because the deadline is this week, we have a competition called Rescue Startups versus COVID-19. We're going to be working very closely with at least 10 startups. They get 100,000 pesos each, equity-free, just grants, right? But the idea is really, that we want to help startups survive this. And in future, right, of course, the next step is, how do we grow? How do we rebuild? But at least in the immediate period, we hope this can be helpful to kind of give a shot of adrenaline to some of our startups that are either dealing directly with COVID-19 or creating, pivoting, right, or doing these sustainable pivots to address sort of what's next, right? So those are just some of the stuff we're working at QBO. But again, this is, a crazy opportunity. We've never seen anything like this before, and I'm actually quite curious and excited to see, what happens on the other side of all of this. So yeah, thank you again for having me today.
Thanks, Kat. James?
Yeah, I'd just pick up on Kat's excitement. I mean, while a lot of what we've mentioned sounds like doom and gloom, and there are significant challenges, there is a massive opportunities out there if you can look for them, find them, and take advantage of them. And I think that there's going to be some ideas and some innovations out there that are going to change our lives, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they can come about. And the Manila Angel Investors Network, as an organization, where we're keen to help find them and foster them and support those people to achieve their dreams.
Thanks, James. Eunice?
I think, though, if there's one thing that I want people to take away from the startup ecosystem in the Philippines, I think is at its inflection point. I think despite the fact that we are still in the middle of a pandemic, there are certain factors that are aligning that could potentially put us ahead, if not at par, with a lot of our ecosystems in Southeast Asia. we are seeing people being repatriated, a lot of them professionals. And if you look at the likes of Vietnam and Indonesia, we've seen that same thing happen before their startup ecosystems took off. We're also seeing greater willingness from consumers and businesses to adopt solutions from tech startups, and I think government is also not too far behind as well. If we're also looking at the experiences of some of our startups that are working with government agencies or LGUs, there's definitely a huge opportunity for government not just to be a regulatory body or a partner, but to really be a customer and to be that important proof of concept for startups. So definitely, I think even despite these times, in a very exciting point for the local startup ecosystem, and we really encourage people to support your local startups. If you want to start a startup, there's so many resources out there from QBO, Kickstart. We also run our own events, and we look forward to seeing what's next for the Philippine startup ecosystem.
Thanks, Eunice. Bit?
So I think it felt like the maturation of the Philippine startup ecosystem accelerated a lot in 2019 and early 2020. Although we hit a wall with the pandemic, I feel like the momentum build over those 15 months has continued, but just simply diverted. The desire to find opportunities and to solve problems continues to be strong from our local founders and entrepreneurs. And we've been seeing really great early stage startups emerging from the great programs like those of IdeaSpace, QBO, and even those coming out from previous runs. You can see them also maturing. And a lot of Philippine startups have also been able to raise a Series A over that period of time. So just Sprout Solutions, Kumu, Tonic, and Great Deals, I believe. So I am excited that Filipino innovation has continued during these tough times. Very excited for Kickstart to continue supporting it. So if you're a startup looking interested to work with a VC, reach out at pitches@kickstart.ph. If you're a corporate looking to bring in innovation by working with startups, reach out to us via collaborate@kickstart.ph.
Thanks, Bit. And last but not least, Sir Mitch.
Hey, Carlo, no sir, please. Anyway, for me, I'd like to continue to encourage our startup industry, the startup players in the market, and thinking to getting into startup. We at PLDT, Smart ePLDT, have always been or always tried to be an enabler to the startups in the country. And even during the conceptualization stage of any design or solution you wish to bring to market, feel free to contact us. You can work with our various industry CFT teams so that from early on, it fits right into the requirement of how we push end-to-end solutions to the market. So congratulations to Carlo and to my colleagues in the panel for a great session today. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitch. With that, I'd like to thank all our panelists for joining us today. Katrina Chan, Eunice Braga, James Lette, Bit Santos, Winston Damarillo, and Mitch Locsin. Truly, I think one of the words that I would like to emphasize is that we all have to be excited for what's next, especially for innovation and startups in the Philippines. So once again, thank you also to SPARKUP Entrep Series sponsors, Globe Telecom, PLDT Enterprise, and SM Supermalls. Our community partners, Startup Village, IdeaSpace Foundation, Impact Hub, Manila Kickstart Ventures, QBO Innovation Hub, our e-learning platform partner, OLearn, and our media business partners, BusinessWorld and the Philippine Star. And of course, all of you, thank you for joining us. Our viewers, thank you for joining us today. My name is Carlo Calimon, Director of Startup Village, and this has been session 2 of the SPARKUP Entrep series. Stay safe, be excited, have a great afternoon, and see you all in our next session.